The studio lights were unforgiving. CNN's Capitol clash was the night's headline debate, and tensions had been simmering since the guests were announced. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the progressive lightning rod, and Congressman Matt Gaetz, the self-appointed guardian of conservative rebellion. What was meant to be a policy discussion had, within seconds, devolved into sharp glances, tightened jaws, and sparks waiting to ignite. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, the moderator began cautiously, "You've long been the face of the Green New Deal. But Congressman Gaetz claims it's a fantasy, unrealistic, costly, and, in his words, written on the back of a Whole Foods napkin." The camera cut to Gaetz, smug and half-smiling. "With respect, Anderson," he said, "the Green New Deal is less of a plan and more of a poetry slam. It's emotion over engineering. The only thing it guarantees is more taxes and less energy," the live audience murmured. AOC didn't blink. She leaned slightly forward, her voice even. "Congressman Gaetz, for someone so concerned about facts, you seem allergic to them. Let's talk records, not slogans. You've voted against every climate initiative in the last 5 years. In fact, your district has rising asthma rates, and yet you consistently side with polluters. Is that part of your poetry?" There was a pause. Anderson Cooper glanced nervously between them. The control room whispered through his earpiece, "Don't cut to break. This is gold." Gaetz chuckled, but it didn't land. His eyes darted briefly to the camera, then back to her. "Oh, come on. You don't think your multi-trillion-dollar plan is just a gift to bureaucrats?" AOC's eyes narrowed. I think letting fossil fuel companies write our future is the real gift. To disaster, to lobbyists, and to people like you." The screen behind them showed graphs, emissions, temperatures, and Gaetz's campaign donations from energy PACs. The studio froze. A producer whispered, "Did she just drop his FEC filings on air?" Yes, she did." Gaetz shifted in his seat. The moment AOC brought up his energy PAC ties, a ripple moved through the studio, not unlike a shark slipping just beneath the surface. The screen behind them now displayed a chart, $312,450 in donations from fossil fuel lobbies over 4 election cycles. Alexandria hadn't just come to defend the Green New Deal. She had come to shred Matt Gaetz's record. And she wasn't done. "Let's make this real," she said, gesturing to the display. "These are your donors. These are the votes you cast. HR 5432. You voted no. That bill would have removed toxic waste sites from low-income neighborhoods in your own state. Do you want to explain why?" Gaetz leaned back, arms crossed, a pose halfway between deflection and defiance. "You're cherry-picking legislation to make a soundbite, not a solution," he replied. "That bill was bloated with pork. And if we're playing the guilt-by-donation game, let's talk about your Hollywood backers." AOC smiled faintly. "You think I'm afraid of transparency? Go ahead. My donors are on the public record. None of them own oil rigs or lobby for pipelines that run through elementary school playgrounds." The audience, though silent, was fully absorbed. One woman in the front row mouthed the words, "She did her homework." Gaetz broke eye contact for the first time. The moderator tried to regain control. "Congressman, would you like to respond with specific climate proposals your office supports?" "I don't believe in fantasies dressed up as policy," Gaetz answered. "We need innovation, not taxation." That was his angle. Simple, rehearsed. But AOC had come armed with more than facts. She slid a folded document from her stack of notes, placed it between them, and looked Gaetz in the eye. "This," she said slowly, is the EPA's report on rising flood risk in your district. Your constituents are paying the price for your denial. So no, this isn't about ideology. This is about survival. Silence. Even the crew behind the cameras stopped moving. The red live light glowed like a warning. And still, Gaetz had no answer. Gaetz straightened up in his chair, his jaw set like concrete. The flood report sat between them, unopened but radioactive. For a brief moment, it wasn't a debate. It was a trial, and the evidence was damning. "You love waving around federal reports," he snapped. "But let's not pretend bureaucrats in Washington know more about my district than I do. You're peddling fear wrapped in statistics." AOC didn't blink. "I'm not peddling fear. I'm revealing facts. And you're doing what you always do, ignoring the consequences because they don't affect you personally." The moderator leaned in, sensing blood in the water. "Congressman, with all due respect, these documents do come from government agencies tasked with protecting public safety. Would you at least acknowledge the data?" "I acknowledge climate change is real," Gaetz said with a grin. "But I don't believe it requires turning America into a socialist sandbox." AOC's laugh was sharp. "There it is, the magic word, socialism. You throw it around every time you run out of arguments. Newsflash, solar panels aren't Marxist." The audience broke into restrained laughter. Gaetz shot a glance toward the producers. This wasn't going the way his team had rehearsed. AOC, emboldened, leaned forward again. "You call the Green New Deal unrealistic, but what's your plan? Hoping Elon Musk builds an air-conditioned Mars colony before Miami drowns?" The crowd gasped. It was raw, sharp, unfiltered. Gaetz fired back. "You want to bankrupt the country to build windmills while China builds coal plants by the hour. That's not saving the planet, it's selling it." AOC stood her ground. "And doing nothing is selling out. To lobbyists, to fear, to the past. The world is moving forward, Congressman. You're the one still clinging to the oil-soaked wreckage." A sudden ding from the control booth meant only one thing. Viewership was surging. Backstage, a technician mouthed, "We're trending." This was no longer a debate. It was a reckoning. And America was watching. The temperature in the studio had risen. Not literally, but viscerally. Every camera was locked in, every mic was hot, and the nation was glued to the broadcast like it was a courtroom drama unfolding in real time. Matt Gaetz leaned forward now, abandoning his calm facade. "You parade yourself as a savior of the planet, but all I see is someone who's never had to balance a budget. You don't know the first thing about how the economy works outside of D.C. Twitter threads and TikTok soundbites." AOC smiled, coldly. "Oh, I know exactly how the economy works for people like you. You cut taxes for corporations, deregulate everything in sight, and then pretend the mess you made is someone else's fault." The studio gasped. Again. Gaetz wasn't letting it go. "You talk about corporate greed while sitting on endorsements from celebrities and billionaires. At least I don't pretend to be something I'm not." AOC grabbed the EPA report off the table and raised it. Her voice was steady but intense. "You're right. I don't pretend. I say it clearly. This is the reality. This is what your voters are breathing, drinking, and fearing every hurricane season. And this," she pointed to the report, "is what you ignore every time you sign another check from a fossil fuel pack." She didn't drop the mic. She threw the facts. Gaetz's response was delayed. For once, he looked rattled. Then he blurted, "If you really cared, you'd move your Green New Deal through both chambers, not just tweet it." AOC didn't flinch. "Maybe if you and your friends in the House weren't sabotaging every environmental bill like it was a personal attack on your donors, we'd get further. The audience broke into spontaneous applause. Producers in the booth debated whether to mute the room. They didn't. And then, unexpectedly, Gaetz stood up. The moderator tried to cut in. "Gentlemen, Congresswoman, let's keep this civil." But the lines had already been crossed. "I came here to debate policy," Gaetz growled, "not be accused of destroying the planet in a courtroom drama written by climate zealots." AOC, still seated, replied calmly, "Then maybe next time, bring policy." Silence. Even the cameras hesitated. The red live light never blinked. The temperature in the studio had risen. Not literally, but viscerally. Every camera was locked in, every mic was hot, and the nation was glued to the broadcast like it was a courtroom drama unfolding in real time. Matt Gaetz leaned forward now, abandoning his calm facade. "You parade yourself as a savior of the planet, but all I see is someone who's never had to balance a budget. You don't know the first thing about how the economy works outside of D.C. Twitter threads and TikTok soundbites." AOC smiled, coldly. "Oh, I know exactly how the economy works for people like you. You cut taxes for corporations, deregulate everything in sight, and then pretend the mess you made is someone else's fault." The studio gasped. Again. Gaetz wasn't letting it go. "You talk about corporate greed while sitting on endorsements from celebrities and billionaires. At least I don't pretend to be something I'm not." AOC grabbed the EPA report off the table and raised it. Her voice was steady, but intense. "You're right. I don't pretend. I say it clearly. This is the reality. This is what your voters are breathing, drinking, and fearing every hurricane season. And this," she pointed to the report, "is what you ignore every time you sign another check from a fossil fuel pack." She didn't drop the mic. She threw the facts. Gaetz's response was delayed. For once, he looked rattled. Then he blurted, "If you really cared, you'd move your Green New Deal through both chambers, not just tweet it." AOC didn't flinch. "Maybe if you and your friends in the House weren't sabotaging every environmental bill like it was a personal attack on your donors, we'd get further." The audience broke into spontaneous applause. Producers in the booth debated whether to mute the room. They didn't. And then, unexpectedly, Gaetz stood up. The moderator tried to cut in. "Gentlemen, Congresswoman, let's keep this civil." But the lines had already been crossed. "I came here to debate policy," Gaetz growled, "not be accused of destroying the planet in a courtroom drama written by climate zealots." AOC, still seated, replied calmly, "Then maybe next time, bring policy." Silence. Even the cameras hesitated. The red live light never blinked. Matt Gaetz stood frozen for a breath too long. His eyes darted. Camera light, moderator, crowd, AOC. There was no script left. No line rehearsed in his mirror that could counter what just happened. And the worst part? He knew it. The moderator, clearly alarmed by the tension, leaned in again. "Congressman Gaetz, you still have 2 minutes for rebuttal if you wish." He waved it off. "No," Gaetz snapped, voice clipped. "I think the viewers got their show." He stepped back from the podium, removing his mic with one swift motion. The metal clip snapped against the wood. The sound echoed through the room like a gavel slamming down. A stunned hush fell. Even AOC blinked, caught off guard not by the drama, but by the weakness in it. Gaetz turned and walked off stage, brushing past a camera operator. His team behind the scenes scrambled, some following him, others glued to monitors. The moderator, stunned but still on air, turned toward Alexandria. "Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, Would you like to proceed with closing remarks? AOC didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply looked into the camera and spoke as if the millions watching were sitting across the table. This wasn't about ego. It never was. This was about the truth. And sometimes, the truth makes people walk away. The broadcast faded into the network logo, but the moment, already clipped and posted across the internet, exploded like wildfire. Gaetz walk out, sin AOC vs Gaetz, sin Green New Deal clash. One tweet read, "She didn't just win the debate, she rewrote the rulebook." Another, "He left because he had nothing left to say." And so, a night meant to be another cable news slot became something else entirely. A turning point in the climate conversation, and a defining moment for two political giants on opposite sides of the future. The footage of Matt Gaetz walking off the stage didn't just replay on national television, it detonated across every platform imaginable. Within minutes, TikTok was flooded with edits. Dramatic music underscoring AOC's mic drop moment, zoomed-in freeze frames of Gaetz's glare, and split screens showing him leaving while tweets scrolled across the screen in real time. Cable networks cut into primetime reruns for emergency analysis. CNN ran with the headline, "Walked out or shut down." Fox countered with, "Staged meltdown or calculated protest." But Twitter had no mercy. Matt Gaetz just rage-quit democracy. She didn't raise her voice once, and still sent him packing. "My 6-year-old handles conflict better." Even foreign journalists picked it up, with a UK political satire page dubbing the exchange as the most American showdown since the Boston Tea Party. Meanwhile, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's team capitalized on the moment. Within hours, a donation page titled "Still Here, Still Fighting" launched with a side-by-side image, AOC at her podium and Gaetz mid-exit. Contributions soared. But the story didn't stop at memes and merchandise. House leadership, both parties, released statements. Some called Gaetz's exit disrespectful. Others praised it as a protest against partisan ambush. The White House remained quiet, but an anonymous aide leaked a quote. The president watched it live. He said, "Damn!" Then he asked for popcorn. Behind the scenes, Gaetz's office scrambled to regain footing. A draft tweet was leaked. "I left because I won't engage with performative nonsense. My record speaks for itself." But the damage had been done. He hadn't just walked out of a debate. He had walked out of the narrative. And AOC? She didn't chase him. She filled the vacuum he left behind. With clarity, confidence, and a fire her base hadn't seen since her first campaign. This wasn't just a clash. It was a broadcast reckoning. And the next day, Capitol Hill buzzed not with policy, but with a singular question whispered in every hallway. The morning after the broadcast, the marble halls of Capitol Hill echoed with a different kind of tension. Staffers huddled by vending machines whispering, aides typing furiously on laptops in corridors, and on every screen, replay after replay of last night's verbal explosion. Matt Gaetz was nowhere to be found. His office was locked, his press team silent. The few Republican allies who tried defending him were met with awkward silences or shifting glances. No one wanted to be associated with what was already being dubbed the Gaetz retreat. On the Democratic side, it was a victory lap, but a cautious one. AOC wasn't celebrating. She was strategizing. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from climate groups, supporters, journalists, and even a few silent Republicans who respected her composure. She wasn't interested in glory. She was interested in momentum. Meanwhile, GOP leadership was livid. Behind closed doors, Kevin McCarthy reportedly slammed his palm on the table. "We lost the room. She owned the airwaves, and he gave her the oxygen." Talk of reprimanding Gaetz began circulating. Not formal, but strategic. Remove him from an upcoming energy subcommittee panel. Push him to less visible speaking engagements? Quietly, of course. But Gaetz? He wasn't done yet. From a private location, he recorded a video. Clean background, flag pin in place. "I walked out because I refuse to play theater while Americans suffer under failed climate hysteria. AOC is a performer, not a policymaker. And the American people deserve truth, not applause lines." The video was posted. And so was AOC's response. Not a video, not a press release. Just a single tweet, with a link to the EPA report and 6 words. "You walked out on this too?" It went viral instantly. As the dust settled, journalists began picking up on something deeper. This wasn't just a skirmish. It was a fracture line running through Congress, between performative politics and data-driven firepower. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? She had just proven she could lead both. Within 48 hours, the debate was no longer about climate policy. It was a national referendum on who Americans believed actually stood for them. Cable news turned the story into a 24/7 frenzy. CNN ran a countdown. Will Gaetz return to the floor? While MSNBC aired a segment called AOC, the Architect of Accountability. On Fox News, Gaetz was praised as a fighter who walked away from socialist bullying, while others in the same segment called it the worst unforced loss of face in recent Republican memory. But it wasn't just pundits. In the streets of New York, murals began to appear. One showing AOC at her podium, facing an empty chair with the caption, "Truth doesn't flinch." Meanwhile, in Pensacola, Florida, Gaetz's home base, posters with bold lettering popped up on street corners. "He walked out for you." Online, TikTokers began recreating the debate with voiceovers, dramatizing Gaetz's exit and AOC's mic drop response. One clip gained 18 million views in a single day, captioned, "This wasn't a debate. This was a reckoning." At universities, students organized forums. Gaetz versus AOC. Who represents your future? Even high school civics teachers began modifying their lesson plans. And perhaps most surprisingly, conservative-leaning independents began voicing conflicted opinions. One went viral on Reddit. "I don't always agree with AOC, but she brought facts, not flair. That matters." Behind the scenes, political strategists took note. Focus groups shifted. Fundraising emails from both sides surged. Alexandria's campaign team saw a 300% spike in donations within 72 hours. Gaetz's backers also mobilized, with super PACs promising to turn the walkout into a battle cry for personal freedom. But what no one could ignore was this. A single televised exchange had transformed into the nation's most heated political flashpoint. And while the parties prepared for midterms, 2 names dominated the conversation. Not the president, not the speaker, but 2 young, firebrand figures on opposite ends of the ideological spectrum. One stayed at the podium. The other walked away. And America? It hadn't stopped talking since. 3 days after the confrontation, something unexpected happened. The United Nations issued a statement. Not about the debate directly, but in response to recent public discourse around climate change and political responsibility in high-profile democracies. While it didn't name names, everyone knew. The footage of AOC's takedown and Gaetz's retreat had gone viral, globally. In Germany, a major newspaper headline read, "Young U.S. Congresswoman destroys climate denial in 6 minutes." In South Korea, A primetime news anchor ended his segment with a raised eyebrow and the phrase, "That's what leadership sounds like." Back in the U.S., AOC was invited to speak at a digital summit on climate policy hosted by the European Parliament. While she hadn't accepted yet, just the invitation drew praise and fury. Gaetz responded with a scathing tweet. "We don't need Europe deciding who America listens to. I stand with real Americans, not foreign applause." The culture war intensified, but something deeper was shifting. For the first time, Gen Z voters, many of whom had been disengaged from traditional politics, were rallying around a single phrase circulating on social media. Facts stayed. Ego walked. And in classrooms from California to Vermont, students asked teachers, "Can we watch that debate again?" AOC, meanwhile, remained composed but focused. In a closed-door strategy session with her team, she said, "This isn't about Matt. It's about forcing a conversation they've avoided for a decade. And now, we've got their attention." Republican leadership scrambled. Whispers grew of whether Gaetz would be benched from key appearances. His core base still backed him, but moderates had gone quiet. And through it all, a single moment defined the political landscape like a lightning bolt in slow motion. A woman standing with data, policy, and fire. A man walking away with fury, but no answer. And the world, watching with unblinking eyes. It was supposed to be just another debate. But what began as a tense policy discussion had morphed into a political earthquake. And in Washington, earthquakes leave aftershocks. A week later, Capitol Hill was transformed. Security had been increased for both representatives. National media parked vans outside both AOC's and Gaetz's offices. The Speaker called an emergency closed-door meeting to address growing division within the House. AOC entered the chamber to a standing ovation, not from all, but from enough to send a message. She sat silently, flipping through the same EPA report she had slammed on Gaetz's desk. Her expression didn't gloat. It calculated. Reporters hounded her after the session. "Do you feel vindicated? Did you plan it all along? Was this a personal attack?" She replied only once. "It was a necessary one." Across the aisle, Gaetz reappeared on Fox News, polished, defiant, flanked by an American flag. "I walked away from a circus. That doesn't make me weak. It makes me sane." But behind closed doors, donors had started asking questions. Quiet calls were made. Strategists began to distance their PACs from his brand. "The optics," one advisor said, "aren't survivable in the long run." Online, the viral storm hadn't calmed. A meme of AOC with the caption, "Read this before you speak," trended on every platform. Hoodies were printed, stickers. Even late-night comedians joined in. Matt Gaetz walked out so fast, his facts didn't have time to catch up. In the weeks that followed, congressional approval for new climate legislation gained traction from both sides. Not because of a report, because one woman had stayed. Because she spoke when it mattered. Because millions saw her and said, "That's who we want, speaking for us." And as the final clip from the debate continued to circulate, AOC's steady voice, the sound of a report hitting the table, and Gaetz's silent exit, one truth remained. This wasn't just a moment. It was a shift. What started as a routine congressional debate became something far more powerful. A defining moment of courage, confrontation, and conviction. Whether you support AOC or Gaetz, this wasn't just politics. It was a wake-up call for a generation. One walked out, the other stood firm, and the echo of that moment is still being felt across the nation. Drop a comment below. Who do you think won the debate? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping political showdowns.